Hey everybody, how are you? I was trying to hold my phone the other way because that was how I practiced. But anyway, this is Banks, and so Banks is going to keep us company, and we're just kind of hoping he doesn't bark because that's a little bit of a problem. I figure we'll give it a few minutes. And hey, Anthony, hello, Miss Puentes, buenos dias. So we're going to read two stories today, and I'm going to keep the replay up just in case other people didn't get a chance. But we're going to do children's stories today. My very good friend Erin, her daughter Ava, I love all of her children. All four of them are fabulous. But Ava wanted me to be their guest visitor and read. And so since we are not allowed to see everybody, Facebook is a great way to get together. So I'm going to be reading two stories today. Bears Don't Read and Miss Renee's Mice. And both of these are great stories. The main characters in both stories learn a lesson. And in Miss Renee's story, it reminds me a little bit of what we're going through, where we have to stay indoors because she lives alone and she makes miniature houses, like doll houses. And one night a storm happens and her mice leave the barn and come into her house and they keep her awake. And then when they go away, she misses them. And so I'm sure some of us are feeling that way. Good morning, Erin. So I was just talking briefly. I was waiting for you to jump on. I hope Miss Ava and Zoe are with you. Hello, Ava and Zoe. And I was just talking about the two stories that we're going to read today. We're going to read Miss Renee's Mice, and we're going to read Bears Don't Read. And I wanted to start with Miss Renee's Mice, but I really like this book. So both of these books, I'm not a salesperson for Usborne, but these are Usborne books, and I just keep buying them because I'm friends with the consultants, and so I like this one. Awesome. So why don't we get started? And look who's behind me. Can you see him? There's Banks right here. Do you see Banks? So he's been so excited for story time too. All right, we are going to get started. Yeah, I do too, Erin. This is such a great book company. I can't wait to read some of the older ones like that Malaya's reading. Yeah, Banks, good Banks. All right, so let's get started. Bears Don't Read. So, let's see. There's the first page. I swear I spent most of my morning practicing how to turn pages. So this book belongs to George. Hi, Becky. Hi, Diane. So here we start. So most days, George sat on a bench by the edge of the woods and stared out at the distant hills. He wondered about life. Oh, life is lovely, he thought, tra-la-la and all that. But is this it, he wondered? Is this all there is? His brothers and sisters never wondered about anything. They were perfectly happy, chatting, fishing, doing the usual bear things, and telling the same old stories over and over again. But George was bored. He didn't want to do the usual bear things anymore. He wanted other things. But what? He wondered. But what? Then, one day, as George was strolling through the forest, he found a book lying beneath the tree. There's the book. Do you see the book? Somebody must have lost it, he thought. How interesting. Inside it were pictures of a bear, just like him. On the other pages, there were lots and lots of words. Each one, even the tiny ones, is saying something, he thought. If only I knew what it was. and this bear is having an exciting life. Not like mine, George sighed. But then he had a brilliant idea. He rushed home to tell the others. I'm going to town to find the owner of this book and to ask them to teach me to read, he said. You don't want to go there, said his brother. They don't like bears in town. But I want to learn to read, said George. That's just silly, said his sister. Bears don't read. Why can't you be happy doing normal bear things? But George would not be put off. He waved goodbye and headed towards the long road into town with the book under his arm. George walked for a whole day and a whole night, stopping to rest on a grassy hill under the sparkling sky. Before he slept, he opened the book again and gazed at the words. Already he felt that the world was a more interesting place. The next morning, George rose with the sun, and by midday he could see the town in the distance. He smiled. It looked lovely. Look at him looking at the town. There must be so many people who know how to read there, he thought, and lots of new stories they can tell me. But, oh no, when he arrived, everyone was running. Some were even screaming. Wait, cried George. He showed the book to a woman rushing by. Do you know whose this is? He asked. It's from the school, she shrieked, and pointed to the red building. Bear! Somebody shouted. Call the police! How peculiar, thought George as he walked towards the school. Look at everybody running away. Inside the school, there was complete silence. Where was everybody? George peered over the desk. Hello, he said, but nobody was there. Only the police. Suddenly, there was a shout. Freeze! Hands above your head! George was surrounded by policemen. What's the matter? He asked nervously. You're a gigantic great grizzly bear, said the chief of police. That's the matter. They moved towards him, holding up their shields. I don't want any trouble, said the chief. George didn't want any trouble either. It wasn't his fault. He was a gigantic great grizzly bear. He held the book tightly in his paw. Do you see? See him holding the book? Just then, the doors burst open, and in walked a little girl called Clementine with her mother. Hey, cried Clementine, that's my book, and that's my bear in the book. This is a dangerous animal, roared the chief. And they're yelling, stand back. "He doesn't look dangerous to me," said Clementine. "No," said George, "I'm not that sort of bear at all. I was just hoping someone could teach me to read." "Silence!" roared the chief. But Clementine wasn't listening. "I'm learning to read," she said. "We could learn together, couldn't we, Mom?" Clementine's mother looked at George. She could see he was a perfectly nice sort of bear. "I don't see why not." "So you'll take responsibility for this bear, will you, madam?" "Certainly," said Clementine's mother. "And there is no need to shout." She held out her hand to George. George moved into the summer house at the end of Clementine's garden, and each day after school, Clementine showed him everything she learned. It wasn't long before George knew all the letters of the alphabet. Look at him working on his letters. George didn't find reading easy at first. Even though he tried hard, he often made mistakes. But luckily, Clementine was a kind and patient teacher. Because learning to read is difficult, right? It takes a long time, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And that's what George is learning. Sometimes the chief came to see how they were getting on. He brought a book of his favorite poetry to read aloud to George. Look at him reading to George. And George is just like you. He's listening. Then one day Clementine said, "I bet you can read this whole book now, all by yourself." George opened it and began. "Once upon a time, there was a large brown bear who found a book lying under a tree." He read the whole book all the way to the end. "Bravo," said Clementine. "We knew you could do it." And for George, this was just the beginning. He's not having an ordinary life now, is he? He made it better. He made a decision. So that is Bears Don't Read. I like this book. So the other book I have for you today is Miss Renee's Mice. So I liked this. I have a sister named Renee, and I saw the doll houses. These are doll houses. And Miss Renee makes the doll houses. So let's read her story, because she's going to learn something today too. Miss Renee lived in a big house by the ocean. That is a big house. The big house was full of little houses. Look at that. The little houses were full of little furniture and other beautiful things. Look at all those things. Miss Renee made the furniture herself out of maple and pine from the Maine woods, because she lives in Maine. She made curtains and pillows and bedspreads out of the best calico fabric she could buy. She made a lot of other things too, colorful rugs and cups and plates and teapots and electric lamps that really worked. Look at all those things she made. Do you see the lamp right there? Miss Renee filled the bookcases with miniature books that she printed on a miniature printing press. She decorated each room with thimble-sized vases of pink and red and yellow tulips that she made from dainty bits of colored paper. Practically anything a little house needed to be perfect, Miss Renee knew how to make. Look at all those things that she made. And the braided rug. Look at that braided rug. When she was all done with a new house and feeling quite pleased with herself, she bought plastic dolls and sat them in the chairs. The dolls were dull and didn't do anything, but she thought the houses looked empty without them. Look at the dolls. One night there was a terrible storm with ice and snow and sleet and wind. Boom! It blew down Miss Renee's barn. Look at that. The barn had been full of mice. Not anymore. The mice moved into the big house. Yeah, they moved into Miss Renee's house. Then they moved into the little house. See that? Look at them going through the window. The mice pitched the dolls out the window and sat on the chairs. They slept in the beds. They switched the lights on and off. They pulled the books down from the shelves and read them. These are very smart mice. They can read books. See him on the bookcase? Look, he's reading a book. They helped themselves to food from Miss Renee's pantry. They even found the secret drawer where she kept her chocolate. So Miss Renee likes chocolate. We have to remember that. The mice dressed up in the dolls' clothes and had wild parties. What a mess! What noise! It was unbearable. Miss Renee's striped cat was too lazy to chase the mice away. They're having a grand time there, huh? Look at them. Miss Renee fretted about what to do. Night after night, she lay awake drumming her fingers on the pillow like this until she thought of something. Look at that. She sawed and whittled and hammered and nailed, and then she sanded and painted and varnished. She stitched and sewed and sewed and stitched on her midget sewing machine, whistling an old sea chanty while she worked. Finally, she was done. See, there's her cat, there's her sewing machine. I wonder what she made. She made something. She had an idea. It was a small ship, but it was big enough to hold every last mouse. Miss Renee printed up tiny tickets and passed them out. "Where are we going?" asked the mice. "Around the world," said Miss Renee, giving the boat a shove. "Goodbye." Do you see them all waving? They're waving goodbye. See the name of the quote? The Good Riddance. Miss Renee began sweeping up after the mice. At last, her big house and all her little houses were tidy and quiet again. Maybe too quiet. Without the mice, Miss Renee had trouble falling asleep at night. Much to her surprise, she missed their squeaky singing and pittery-pattery dancing. She missed the happy party sounds. Each morning she went back to work making pine furniture and calico curtains and other beautiful things, but they didn't seem so beautiful anymore. It was sad to think that no one would be sleeping in her little beds or switching on the electric lights or reading the miniature books. No one would serve tea in her teapots or admire her vases of tiny tulips. No one would roll up her little braided rugs and dance a jig. Miss Renee felt glum. She let out a long sigh. Then she busied herself with her work and tried not to think about the mice. Look at how lonely it looks without the mice. Weeks passed, and then months. By the time whole seasons had passed, bringing autumn leaves and snowflakes and wildflowers, Miss Renee had almost forgotten about the mice, until one day when she looked out the window and saw a ship. At first she thought it was a big ship far away, but it was a small ship very close. She ran down to the ocean to meet it. "Where have you been?" she cried. "Around the world, of course," said the mice, as they began unloading their cargo. Look how happy she is to see them. Well, let's see what they brought back, since she said they had cargo. They brought back rosewood from Bolivia and tulip wood from Burma. They had also brought mahogany from Honduras, hornbeam from Iran, bamboo from China. There was silky oak from Australia, koa wood from Hawaii, teak from Cameroon, and zebra wood from Zimbabwe. The mice had brought fabric too. Tweed from England, tartan from Scotland, and lace and linen from Ireland. There was brocade from Belgium, velvet and satin from France, batik from Java, kente cloth from Ghana, madras from India, and brilliant woven cotton from Guatemala. Look at that. They did go everywhere, didn't they? As if that weren't enough, they had also brought rice paper from Japan and marble from Italy and yak's wool from Tibet. And last but not least, a box of Turkish taffy. Whoops, that's the mailman. Thanks. And Turkish taffy and an enormous chocolate bar from Switzerland. So, remember we said she liked chocolate. They remembered. Thanks. Sorry about that. Miss Renee looked at the mice. She looked at all the beautiful things they had brought her from all over the world. Welcome home, mice. Hey, shh. The end. And no animals were hurt while writing this book. So that is Miss Renee's mice. Shh. So see, the lesson that Miss Renee learned was her house was quiet and she loved doing her crafts. But once she had the company of the little mice, at first she thought that they were a nuisance, right? But then when she had them go away, she realized she missed them. And sometimes that happens to us. Sometimes we realize after somebody leaves or after we stop doing something, like we really missed that. And maybe while we're stuck in our houses, we can think about the things that we might be missing. But then as soon as we're able to go back out, we can go to those places, right? So I think she learned a good lesson. And our friend George, he learned how to read, which was really great. So those were our 2 stories for today. So Miss Ava, if you enjoyed this, I can do this anytime you want. You just let me know. And I put the stories in YouTube. I read this one earlier, and I'll read this one and put it in YouTube so that you can have them for later. I'll put the link in Twitter, and you'll have this replay here as well. So thank you for joining me for story time. I love story time. And I'll pick out some more books for tomorrow. All right? Have a great day, everybody. And Ava and Zoe, you guys have a fun day, okay? Bye.